Hello there, and welcome to another 3876 AD lore and history video. Today we take a closer look at a Moon faction soldier, an influential woman who helped shape what would later become the Moon Alliance. Support my work, hit that like button and smash that subscribe button, share this video and comment below. Without further ado, let's start this. Many years ago, as early as the first few years of the pre-3876 era, humanity had been split. Not only would there be a plethora of hybrid humans wandering the lands on Earth, beast-like men solely bred for warfare, but also the population itself was spread farther apart. The Moon had been a colony since many decades, and places further away, like Mars and the moon Europa, were being colonized as well. This was around the same time when a dangerous combat augmentation called modification drones saw its first usage during ever more growing conflicts. In the post-3876 era, Aoi Zara was an instrumental warrior during the Interstellar Crusades and fought against all odds to liberate mankind from the ill effects of the modification drones, a technology that had plunged all of humanity into centuries of senseless and brutal warfare. During her life as a faction soldier, she spent most of her time on the Moon. Since the earliest days of the pre-3876 era, extensive terraforming was conducted and an artificial atmosphere was generated around the Moon itself. This new atmosphere was nothing humans could survive, at least not in the beginning, but it was enough to start growing crops for materials and food. In time, the modification drones also served a very different function for the people on the Moon, as they gave them the ability to gradually survive in this new atmosphere without the help of a spacesuit. Despite the destructive programming of the modification drones and their intended purpose, the people on the Moon, as well as most other societies in colonies and space stations outside of Earth, experienced this secondary function of forced evolution. The mentality of Earth faction soldiers and Moon faction soldiers was therefore very different, and their distinct relation with the modification drones would become ever more pronounced, especially during the times between wars, when only little traveling between the two planetoids was possible. The lack of capable spaceships meant that the two factions were isolated, sometimes for centuries, and while the Earth factions mostly remained in a strong, delirious warlike state, the Moon factions always had periods of clarity, which they used to develop the most sophisticated technologies known to man. During the many wars fought over hundreds of years after the first colonialization of the Moon, large portions of Earth's continents had been destroyed or are almost uninhabitable. Most of the remaining population would often leave for the Moon and settle there, as to not deal with the dangerous fauna and flora on Earth. Despite their scientific prowess, the people on the Moon were still in the end mostly focused on warfare. Even in their moments of innovation, the modification drones' firm grip over the thoughts and desires of mankind remained. The uniqueness of their forced evolution, however, had contributed greatly to the later formation of the Moon Alliance in the post-3876 era. When the factions on Earth were transformed into the Earth military at the dawn of the age 3876, it took only a few more months until the news finally reached the Moon. There was talk about them possessing new and powerful psychic abilities, something people never knew to be possible. While there was no form of supernatural powers at play, the likes of Commander Larson and many in his allegiance had developed a state of mental clarity beyond that of normal humans. As a result, they were able to not only free themselves from the ill effects of the modification drones in general, but also gained the ability to control them with their willpower alone. When the conquest of the moon by the Earth military began, Aoi Zara was the commander on a space station outside of our solar system. She had traveled there many decades ago and oversees the war between their faction and a resistance faction on a nearby rogue planet. As a result, Commander Zara did not hear about the troubles back on her home, the moon. Her daily life was marked by constant interstellar warfare, and in this rare occasion, many battles fought with the resistance on the rogue planet were also fought in space. This was also when Zara had started to build up her unmatched ability as starship tactician, and would lead their assaults to victory many times over during these altercations. The eventual inability to overpower their enemies solely stemmed from the fact that the rogue planet had capable space and air defense systems, superior technology dating back to ancient times. Impenetrable shields made from unknown and long-lost technology would protect the largest cities and industries on the planet, making any air assault almost completely pointless. Commander Zara was often very frustrated by the fact that they would come so close to victory, only to be completely annihilated by the space artillery of their enemies. To make matters worse, her moon faction also had encounters with the Orkans, especially much more frequently as time went on. The Orkan ships were of strange design, double-sided step pyramids with no clear sign for a bridge or engineering section. As expected from machine men, their ships are extremely generalized and much worse than anything else, seem to just appear in space without warning. In the later days of the pre-3876 era, the Orkans had started to perfect their so-called spatial rift technology. They already had used a limited form of the same technology on Earth to transport troops and equipment over great distances almost instantaneously. With small portable devices, they would use rogue modification drones to sort of rip a hole into space itself and connect 2 points with each other. Rogue modification drones are a contamination of the environment, which arises from the bodies of wounded or fallen soldiers. This mostly harmless but unbreathable mass of dark mist haunts the landscapes of post-war regions. This very corruption is basically the birthplace of the Orkans, as they were revived and merged with mechanized combat suits by these very rogue modification drones, the forced evolution of man. In time, the Orkans had learned to harness the power of the modification drones unlike any other faction, creating the most advanced technologies humans had ever dreamed of. In turn, their industries and especially their spatial rift technology uses the rogue modification drones as fuel source, which makes the previously relatively harmless corruption of the environment a hazardous smog that consumes all matter in search for ever more energy. Commander Zara always had her hands full when the Orkans would show up. They were a formidable enemy and would also serve as a true test of intellect, since they were pitting their spaceships against each other. While the Orkans were not lacking in mobility, as they were apparently able to teleport their spaceships around as they please, their combat ability in space is not the same as on Earth. The mighty and powerful weapons of the Moon faction vessels would do significant damage, and in turn the weapons of the Orkans only marginally affected the energy shields that most importantly protects the Moon faction space station itself. Despite their clear advantage in armaments, the fact that the Orkan vessels could so easily retreat from battle made them a problem. Especially their ability to recover from a lost encounter would surprise Zara on many occasions. Often they would need 2 or 3 rounds of getting obliterated by the sheer power of the Moon faction weapons, before finally giving it a rest for a few weeks. One other problem was the extensive contamination of rogue modification drones in the vicinity after a fight against the Orkans would finally conclude. From their engines, weapons, and immensely so caused by their spatial rift technology, a ludicrous amount of these rogue modification drones would be released into the surroundings. The scientists on Commander Zara's space station would tirelessly work on a special kind of gravitational technology which would allow them to destroy the rogue modification drones on a larger scale, even repel them with a new type of shielding technology. Traveling through the thick black mass of rogue modification drones in their spaceships, even if they were inert, was still very troublesome. The engines would need exceedingly more fuel, the power demand on the generators would increase dramatically, and the occasional encounter with a volley of hazardous types would endanger the hull integrity. Many hands were lost while traversing this corruption, which made Commander Zara and her faction even more furiously determined to also win this war against the Orkans. Zara suspected that the Orkans might have tried to flee from Earth. Perhaps, she thought, the homeworld is no more. During the battles between these two forces, the Resistance faction on the rogue planet would mostly keep a low profile. They knew that they would not be a match for the Orkans, and intervening in an ongoing space skirmish between Commander Zara's Moon faction and the Orkans would only spell doom for their own fleet. A more cunning strategy was to use this turmoil in order to infiltrate the Moon faction's space station, maybe gain the upper hand by hacking or sabotaging key infrastructure elements. It was a long shot, but nothing would stop them from trying. Their thirst for warfare is just too great. These infiltration attempts would rarely result in even the most marginal success. The Resistance faction often underestimated the sheer size of the Moon faction's space station, housing over 2 million soldiers with integrated mining, farming, and heavy manufacturing industries. The space station is a colossal structure which could not be brought down by just a few untrained and unprepared spies. Every day when I go to sleep, 2 hours long, I stare into the stars. I slowly fall into my conscious slumber. The war is flashing before my eyes. Why have humans become like this? Have we always been in this endless cycle of destruction? Is it our destiny to eventually destroy ourselves? If my darkest thoughts would manifest, that would mean that Earth had been destroyed by these machine men. The next step for humanity is to merge with the weapons they had created. I wonder why the Orkans attack us. They had always been off Earth. It makes no sense for them to bother us out here. I seem to have no true feelings either way, but something within my mind dreads the prospect of our homeworld no longer existing. Maybe they are all gone, and we are the last humans that survived. After many more years enduring the constant fighting against either the Resistance faction on the rogue planet or dealing with the Orkans, the local scan showed an armada of spaceships closing in on their position. New spaceship designs which they had never seen before were approaching, and almost everyone, including Aoi Zara, knew that this would mean trouble. After the Earth military had conquered the Moon, its second in command, Kal Adan, would lead what is now known as the Interstellar Crusades into the farthest colonies and space stations humans had built. Despite being sent and serving under the Earth military, Commander Adan had since changed his plans slightly, and as he reaches farther out into the void, more and more he would start building the Moon Alliance. In the decades since Aoi's departure from the Moon, a legendary war hero, Commander Larsen, had formed the Earth military in the meantime and subjugated all other factions in our solar system. The Earth military developed a new strain of modification drones which could cure their constant desire for aggression and warfare. Already a large portion of mankind was inoculated, and the endless wars back on Earth had ended. The communication was not scrutinized since it came from another Moon faction vessel, but after Adan's arrival on the station, everything changed drastically. He was not here to administer the inoculations, and instead claimed her space station as well as the colony on the rogue planet as Moon Alliance territory. Commander Zara was obviously not happy about that and refused to cooperate. During the next few weeks, she spent most of her time in a prison cell as Adan and his forces first steamrolled her space station and battle cruisers before laying waste to the remaining Resistance faction on the rogue planet. The insane firepower their new spaceships were equipped with had no problem penetrating the shielding technology on the planet. Not complacent with her situation and enraged by the recent events, Zara decided to get her hands on this new fabled inoculation. As she overheard many times over and was specifically informed by loyalists, this second strain of modification drones was something special. Adan's conduct is a last resort to rebel against these new powers by the Earth military. By amassing enough manpower in this moon alliance of his, he might force the Earth military into concessions as to not commit to another devastating war, which would surely be the end of mankind. With the help of a few trusted allies, Aoi was able to escape from her imprisonment and started to plan her next move. Even though the Moon Alliance seems to no longer administer the inoculations as they initially set out to do by the Earth military, they still carry the cargo with them. There is one small ship in particular which holds a science lab where they store a few easily accessible containments of the second modification drone type. Aoi was told that if she'd inoculate herself, she would also gain unparalleled powers and will surely be able to outwit Adan's plans and secure a victory for the Earth military. Faced with the current situation, Zara's decision to change faction allegiance was nothing special. The modification drones have full control over most of her decisions and are also mostly to blame. Earth and Moon factions have always mingled with each other, forming alliances and resulting betrayals to improve one's odds was a standard part of the modification drone's programming. The prospect of this new Earth military faction being probably much stronger made the decision very easy, and the infiltration of the science vessel began in accordance. Taking over the ship was quite chaotic, involving many forms of stealth, deceit and trickery, but eventually they made it into the lab of the vessel and started their own inoculation. Administering modification drones was not new to anyone. All of mankind had been in a state of constant warfare, and dying on the battlefield was a common experience, brought back by nothing more than a few thousand modification drones. Given time, any injury will heal. The Moon factions were especially adept in reviving the fallen. Specialized tanks were built to regenerate a soldier's body from nothing more than a few remaining cells. There was also extensive research into matters of consciousness and self-awareness. Like the Orkans, also the Moon factions were convinced that the modification drones carry the essence of what makes a person. By providing genetic material, they will recreate the same being, not just a copy or a clone. In unique experiments conducted on Commander Zara's very space station, they found out many clues as to how this process works, but could not conclude their findings due to Adan's arrival. The second strain of modification drones works very different. Administering only a few dozen, these specialized nanobots would instead create a link between one's consciousness and the modification drones in and to some extent around one's body. After inoculating herself and most of her team of loyalists, Aoi Zara experienced an awakening not unlike that of Larsen. Her exceptional experiences during the years spent in constant warfare with the Orkans and the resistance faction on the rogue planet changed something within her psyche and enabled a sudden power-up. She became one of the Awoken and a powerful controller type. Aside from two others, most of her team would only reach the state of deciders. The second strain of modification drones basically had only a small effect on them, removing the inherent destructive programming of the modification drones, but nothing more. A process so innocuous that it was not even noticed by them at first. Satisfied with the results so far, Zara made it her short-term goal to inoculate as many of Caladan's forces as possible, while his main troops, as well as himself, were busy battling on the rogue planet. When Adan returned, he was faced with the fact that most of his fleet had turned on him and are now under the control of Commander Zara. After taking over, Zara had already studied the recent events and the rise of the Earth military. Now that she is inoculated herself, she sees no reason to oppose the rule of this new faction and recognized how they might have even saved humanity from total extinction. Without any options left and no way to fight back, Adan had to turn himself in. As self-appointed ambassador to the Earth military, Aoi Zara decided to serve as administrator for the Moon Alliance, and eventually, after many talks, Commander Adan agreed to her terms. The Moon Alliance would be officially recognized, and their sovereignty, especially their freedom to refuse the inoculation with the second strain of modification drones, would be guaranteed. In the post-3876 era, after returning to our solar system, Aoizara would officially become the administrator of the moon. Thanks for watching. In the next and last video in this mini-series about the characters in the world of 3876 AD, we will cover another artificial being from a time where hybrid humans were used as biological weapons. I hope you are looking forward to this one. Like and subscribe to the channel, share the video and leave a comment below if you like. And we will see us soon.